three main benefits to getting a cycling shoe. First is that it creates a platform for us to connect with the bike from and make adjustments for if the body needs it. Specifically, if your feet would fall asleep, if you might have any knee or hip pain, we can help to manage those by getting you in cycling shoes and working on it from there. The second thing is that it enables us to have a higher cadence. The goal is normally to be between 90 to 105 revolutions per minute. And if you're not clipped in, you might find that your feet might want to fly off the pedals if you're pedaling that fast, so you don't have that concern when you're clipped in. The final thing is that it enables us to pedal in circles, is how we describe it, meaning that we can push and pull throughout the whole pedal stroke, activate more muscles in the legs, and ultimately help us reduce lactic acid buildup in one specific muscle, but share that over many different muscles so that you can feel better for a longer period of time on the bike. Traditionally, the question is about what type of riding you're going to do, and we generally split that into three different categories: road riding, mountain riding, and spin class cycling, basically. So traditionally for mountain biking and for spin class, we would do a mountain bike shoe, which is this design. And this is designed where it has a sole that you can walk on it very easily, and the cleat, when it gets attached on here, is recessed so you don't actually walk on the cleat itself. That makes it easy to put on, walk around, go ride your bike, kind of do all of that stuff. But it does localize the pressure in that spot on the bottom of the shoe, which is the concern. Traditionally, when we start talking about going to a road bike, then the question becomes, do we run a mountain bike shoe or a road bike shoe on a road bike? And that gets down to the person's preference of how much walkability they want to have off the bike to how much comfort they want to have on the bike. Because of the fact that this cleat size is smaller, that localizes pressure in that spot on the foot, and sometimes that can cause a thing called hot foot, or almost a burning sensation in the foot. And so one of the ways that we can make that better is we can go to a road shoe. This design uses a different hole pattern, and then the cleat is this big, and that now puts pressure on the whole ball of the foot compared to just that little spot of the mountain bike cleat. And so that enables us to have better comfort there, but we walk right on the cleat, which makes it a little bit tougher to walk on. So that's not as enjoyable to get off the bike and walk around, but for that 20 miles that you might be riding, you're going to find that your feet are going to be happier while you're doing that. Then if you're going to go over 2 hours of riding, we would try to talk you into a carbon fiber soled cycling shoe compared to a plastic soled cycling shoe, so that it supports the foot better and reduces fatigue to the foot, making it stay happier and not fall asleep or cramp on you while you're cycling. If we're talking to a road cyclist, we would look at the length of the ride, determining should we look at mountain or road shoes. Traditionally, we would suggest that if you're going to ride over an hour of time, that we would encourage you to go to a road shoe to get that bigger cleat size to support the foot better. If you're talking mountain or road and going over 2 hours of riding in an individual ride, we would encourage you to go to a carbon fiber soled road shoe or mountain shoe to make it stiffer, to support the foot better so it doesn't fatigue as quickly, therefore making your feet happier so you can enjoy riding for a longer period of time. Here at Village, one of our biggest concerns is to make sure that we fit things correctly for each person with the products that they're buying. And in relationship to shoes, we actually want to measure the foot compared to just asking what size shoe you might wear. And so we use a Brannick device, and we're going to take 8 different measurements of your feet, being your weighted length, your unweighted arch length, your weighted arch length, and your weighted width. The reason that we do that is we want to understand if there's any differences between the right or the left foot. Sometimes they are not the same size. And we're trying to figure out, do any of those 8 dimensions that we're measuring, do they tell us to sell you a different size shoe? And so that's kind of the game that we have to figure out. Our first thought process in the recommendation for the fit of the shoe is to encourage you to get your shoes based off your unweighted arch length. And the reason that we do that is that we would like to have the arch of the shoe match up to the arch of your foot, so it tries to help prevent that from collapsing and moving around while you're driving down into the pedal stroke. We would also like to have the widest point of the shoe match up to the widest point of the foot so that the shape there fits and doesn't compress the foot. The final reason why we want to get the shoe based off the unweighted arch length is that we would like to have the cleat placement be correct on the shoe to place the ball of the foot over the spindle of the pedal, and the drilling in the shoe is drilled based off the assumed arch length. And sometimes people's arch lengths could be longer or shorter than their actual foot length, and that causes us complications with being able to get everything set up. A lot of times we in the industry call that a thing called hot foot, which is basically an irritation of the nerve in the foot which talks back to the brain as a burning sensation. Specifically, you have your metatarsals that go across the front of the foot here, and there's a nerve that runs out between each of those, and if those kind of get pushed together, they get irritated and give us that burning or hot foot sensation. And there's generally 4 things that would cause that to happen in someone's kind of experience in cycling. One option is they don't have what's called a metatarsal button, which is a second arch support which comes in under these metatarsals and keeps them elevated so they don't collapse down and push together. The second option is that your shoes can be too narrow, and when that happens, all of these bones get pressed together, causing that compression of the nerve and the hot foot. Then we can have that we're on a cleat that is too small, generally a mountain bike style of cleat, and that will localize pressure into one of the metatarsals, which gets irritated in that nerve, having that sensation. And then the final option is that our sole of our shoe is too soft, generally a plastic sole compared to a carbon fiber sole, and that localizes that pressure again. We're on that carbon sole because it's stiffer, we get pressure in the whole ball of the foot compared to just that ball, and it makes life more comfortable for us. Generally, people would describe that happening kind of somewhere in this area of the foot. It can be right to like the pinky toe. Sometimes it can travel down the outside of the foot, but generally it's a sensation towards this outside of the foot is what people are describing. And generally, in addition to what we've talked about so far with the hot foot, this can also be contributed by 3 other kind of factors. One is that we don't have enough pronation support, or the body pronates, and we're not accommodating for that within the pedal to shoe interface. About 87% of the population pronates, so that's a pretty common one that we deal with. And what that basically means, if this was your left foot, your foot is actually tilted like this when it's unweighted, and when we clip into the pedal, it forces the foot to be flat, and that causes us to drive harder into that outside of the foot. So what we do is we come in and we support the shoe like this in its neutral alignment for your body, and that then evens out the pressure across the ball of the foot and not high loading that outside of the foot. The second option is that the shape of the shoe doesn't match up to the shape of your foot, or more so your arch length doesn't match up to the size of the shoe. So we have this widest point of the shoe, which should be across the metatarsals, but unfortunately if your arch length is longer than your foot length, which is kind of the more common one that we see, your widest point of your foot is actually extending forward here and getting pressure to this outside and making it fall asleep. The final option to look at is sometimes people's stance width is too narrow in relationship to their hip width. And as a way to test this, if you would stand and put your feet as close together as possible, you might find that you stand harder to the outside of the foot, where if we can get your stance width to be more neutral, you'll put pressure more evenly across the whole foot. So the opposite can also happen where we have pressure towards the big toe or the inside of the shoe, and it's kind of the opposite of what we just described. A very few percentage of the population actually supinates, so instead of us looking like this, the foot is actually naturally like this, and we have to need to make a support in the opposite way. The second option can be is if you've started to try to manage pronation support in your shoes, sometimes you can actually overcorrect that, and by overcorrecting it, you start to high load that big toe side of it, and that means you need to take away some of that correction that you've done. And you might have tried it out and in 5 or 10 minutes it felt okay, but after an hour of riding, it started to go more towards that big toe, and it just means that you've learned more about your body and you need to modify that correction that you've made. The last one option for the big toe, which is a little bit on the rare side, but if your stance width is actually too wide, then you can put pressure onto the big toe, causing that to be there, and so your stance width needs to be narrowed up a little bit to get that more even to your pelvis. It depends on the type of bike, so different bikes give us different options of how to do that, but there's 2 main options. One is that you can buy pedals that are done in different lengths, and so there's 2 companies that we work with that make 5 different spindle lengths, and depending on what your body is and what the cranks of your bike are, we can pick out different size pedals to accommodate that. Or there's things called pedal extenders, which come in just one size, but that's another option of how to do that. There are limitations on carbon fiber crank arms to be doing these types of adjustments, so sometimes your bike has an effect to what we can do. And specifically a road bike, a mountain bike, and a fat bike all have different stance widths, so you might need a different setup, if you want to call it, on each bike to achieve the same alignment from your pelvis to your feet.